Open Rose Garden, an Adrienette Hanahaki alternate universe sequel series fanfiction, part 4. It had been a few more days and a few more missed classes on Marinette's end when the boys decided that they had finally had enough of the mystery. "That's it, we're going," Nino announced when Adrien got home and told him that yet again he was all alone in class. But the question is how do we get in? Nino wondered thoughtfully. Adrien suddenly snapped his fingers, an idea popping into his head. "Hey, didn't Marinette and Alia hide a key somewhere around here? For emergencies?" he wondered aloud. Nino gasped and ran to his room. "You are an absolute genius," the brunette shouted as the sound of rummaging was heard. Adrien laughed and picked up the growing stack of note packets. He could at least drop them off while he was over. "Here," Nino cried, holding up the shiny key in Adrien's face. Adrien slightly stepped back, shocked by the metal. "Got it. Man, I can't believe I forgot about this," he laughed. Adrien shrugged, only vaguely remembering when Alia had hid it in their house months ago. "It is only for emergencies," she had instructed him. "No sneaking in for snacks." That was pointed towards him. Emergencies. In fact, the last time that Alia had come over was only a day or so ago, but it was a very quick visit. She seemed rather on edge the whole time, constantly checking the time and all that. Alia was a normally cool and calm person. She rarely ever freaked out. And that was actually more of Marinette's thing to do, really. She was a lot more excited. Nino was obviously very worried about his girlfriend. He ended up taking her out to dinner that night to try and ease her worries, but she wouldn't tell him exactly what was wrong, and it really didn't do much. "Is she... Are we?" Nino had asked when he arrived home in near tears. His anxiety levels had risen too throughout the night. "No way," Adrien promised him. "She's not nervous about doing something. It's like she's waiting for something that she isn't gonna like. Like a ticking time bomb," he said. "She loves you a lot. There's no doubt about that at all, okay? I'm sure she's just stressed about a test." Nino had also panicked a lot that night, safe to say. Later, though, he had called Alia and they talked things out. Adrien turned out to be correct, and Alia explained that she was just very on edge, waiting for a diagnosis for a very close family member. They didn't press any further, but Alia and Nino planned a date a week later in advance. "This feels incredibly weird," Nino admitted as they reached the girls' apartment. Adrien had to agree. It sort of felt like they were sneaking in somewhere they weren't supposed to be, which was exactly what they were doing, sneaking into somewhere they were not supposed to be. Adrien guessed that if he had gone to boarding school, this was the feeling that he would have gotten if he snuck into a girl's dorm. Not that he would do that. Just, come to think of it, why didn't he go to boarding school? "I hope Alia doesn't kill me," Nino muttered when he took out the key. Adrien snapped out of his daze, and he watched as Nino started to unlock the door. He had just barely gotten the key into the lock when an ear-splitting scream rang out. Adrien felt his blood run cold, and he and Nino looked at each other for only a second before the latter turned the lock and practically burst through the door with a kick. "Alia!" he cried out, rushing in. "Marinette!" Adrien followed his lead. His eyes went in a frenzy all around the living room before they focused on Alia sitting on the couch. Her hand was over her mouth, and her eyes were spilling with tears. In less than a second, Nino rushed over and wrapped his arms around her. Babe, what happened?" he said worriedly. Adrien bit his lip and looked around for Marinette, but she wasn't around. Please hurry, Alia said hurriedly to whoever she was on the other line with. Nino sent Adrien a wide-eyed and worried look. Adrien shrugged with his arms up. I don't know, he mouthed. Nino only wrapped his arms around Alia tighter. She let out a sob when she clicked off the phone, turned around, and buried her face into his chest. Nino leaned down and began whispering words that Adrien couldn't quite hear to her. Alia's breasts were still heavy and uneven, cut with cries and sobs. Okay, so, something seriously bad had happened. Or else Alia would not be crying on the couch like this. The sharp sounds of a painful and heavy cough cut through the house, and Adrien knew it just had to be Marinette. I mean, who else was in here? He tore through the apartment, looking for the source of the sound. He heard Nino and Alia stand up suddenly to follow him. Alia muttered something, but that thought really wasn't on the forefront of his mind. Marinette, he called out, hearing another weak cough in response. He just barely heard Nino asking Alia, what is happening? She didn't respond. Or maybe she did. Adrien didn't know because he had bolted to the door where he heard the noise coming from and nearly ripped the door out of its hinges with so much power. The scene lay in front of him shocked him. His hand flew up to his mouth in a huge gasp, and he felt a flurry of conflicting emotions running through him. Never once had he felt so scared and panicked in his entire life. Marinette, he said. This time his voice was very audible. Oh my god. On the bathroom floor, Marinette just barely lay against the wall. Her arm was trying to prop herself up, but it didn't seem to be doing much. Surrounding her were flowers. Flowers? Flowers and flower petals. Colors of red and pink were everywhere. His eyes darted around, trying to take in the scene, but oh my goodness, what on earth? Marinette raised a hand to her face and hid behind her hair. She was definitely embarrassed. Adrien felt awful, but then his green eyes spotted the toilet bowl that seemed to have about 400 flower bouquets spilling out of it, or something. Thick red liquid still clung to the sides. Even as the petals fell, the traces of red remained on them and the floor. Another harsh cough rapped through Marinette, and when she lowered her hand for a second, Adrien swore he saw another flower in it that hadn't been there before. What? Marinette, Adrien said, snapping out of his daze, and he rushed towards her, practically fell to his knees. She made a whimpering sound and attempted to move away from him, but the moment she stopped depending on the wall for balance was the moment that she fell totally over. Adrien just barely caught her from hitting the solid ground. What's happening? What's going on? What is this? He asked in a flurry. His eyes were darting everywhere. Marinette didn't respond, but rather tears began to flow down her face. Adrien brought a hand up to wipe them away gently, even as she attempted to swat him back. It seemed like she had no strength in herself doing so, though. I'm sorry, she just barely whispered, and Adrien's panic levels rose and reached an all-time high, if that was even possible. What? Why? I don't understand. Before she could explain, Marinette's eyes fluttered closed and she fell limp into his arms. Alia screamed loudly. Adrien only stared at Marinette, frozen in fear. What was going on? And was Marinette okay?